Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everyone. My name is Matt Sprintz. I'm the CEO of Bryntum. Today I'm joined by Johan Isaacson, who is our head of engineering. And together we will walk you through the Bryntum version 5 and show you all the features and new demos that the team has built. And let's see, before I get started, let's see if I can fire up my video stream. 1 second. There we go. So I will start things off by giving you a look back of what we've been up to the past 12 months or so. And then we will do a full feature walkthrough and show the new demos and all the cool features that the team built. Then Johan will take over and give you a hands-on demo of how to use multiple Bryntum products in your apps. And this is something we greatly simplified in version 5. Then I will take over the screen to go over some of the improvements to the drag-drop package. We heard over and over from our customer base that the end users really like to drag external objects onto the timeline or onto the tasks themselves. And then Johan will show you in a hands-on exercise how to upgrade from version 4 to 5. And we built a small sample app to help show that. And then finally, I will go through a little bit of our short-term and long-term roadmap and see what that looks like. And of course, there's room for questions in the end, so don't hesitate to drop your questions as we present. All right. But before we start, I would just like to say that on behalf of Bryntum, we stand in full solidarity with the Ukrainian people to strongly condemn these horrific actions that we're seeing, and we really hope this all comes to an end as soon as possible. So, I would like to start off now with giving you a quick look at what we've done the past year or so. In total, we've closed around 1,800 pull requests in our GitHub repo. And as a result, we've been able to put out 49 releases in total across our entire product suite. We also have 5 really awesome, talented colleagues join the team, and that makes me super happy. So without their help, this would be very, very hard to do. And of course, also consuming excessive amounts of coffee for sure helped. One of my personal favorites of last year was that we finally dropped support for IE 11. So this means that all the patches, the workarounds, and the band-aids have been completely removed. So make sure if you still rely on this, that it's time to upgrade to the new modern Edge. We also have NPM support now, so you can install our products just like you install any other NPM packages. Just target the private Bryntum repo. We also announced a super shiny Kanban task board, which supports organizing your tasks into any number of columns or swim lanes. And this is a great way of keeping an eye of your day-to-day work in your team. We actually use it ourselves internally. And then Calendar got a nice new enhancement as well, a resource view mode, which lets you look at resources in a side-by-side view. And those views can be either day views, week views, or month views, etc. And it looks really nice and Outlook-like. And that was great work by our colleague Nige. We also had a lot of requests for this infinite scroll feature. So we shipped that during 2021. And this lets you scroll infinitely into the past or into the future, which also makes it easy to implement load as you scroll type of UIs, which is great to not have to load too much data into the client side. Then, of course, we had our annual company outing in Croatia, which was a super nice event, especially when you're a company like ours. You are full remote. You don't get to see each other so often. So these weeks mean really so much for us. We can discuss the hard to solve problems and, share a beer or a coffee together and enjoy life So it was really good, and we actually built a few of the features that we'll show today during that week. So that was super nice. And with COVID being less of an issue now, in at least in the Nordics, we have seen conferences begin popping up again. So we're very happy to announce that we will be sponsoring the JFocus in May, as well as our favorite JavaScript conference in Stockholm called Nordic JS. So yeah, we hope you attend both of those and hope to see you there. So that's a bit of what we've been up to in the past. So I will now hand over the screen to Johan, and yeah, Johan, you want to take it over from here and show a bit of the new shiny features? Let me switch off my screen.
Thank you, Mats. Hi, everyone. I am Johan Isaacson. I'm the head of engineering at Bryntum, and I'm pleased to present a whole slew of new features added to 5.0, all of them created on requests from you, our clients. And without further ado, we're going to move on to something that's close to my heart, namely performance. And in 5.0, we have greatly reduced the time it takes to get the first task in Gantt on screen. And the same is true for the first event in Scheduler Pro. And before I tell you what changed, I need to give some background on how Gantt and Scheduler Pro work behind the scenes. So both of them are using a graph-based engine to handle calculations. And when data is loaded, the graph is constructed and all the tasks or events are calculated. That includes taking calendars, dependencies, assignments, etc., constraints into account, correcting and normalizing dates and durations, and so on. And for a large dataset, this can take some time. For 10,000 tasks, we've seen that it can take up to 8 seconds on a not super new computer, and that's quite a long while to wait before something appears on the screen. So in 5.0, we have refactored this process, and we now render tasks as early as possible. So after they are loaded, but before they enter this engine, we display them on screen. This makes them appear a lot faster. So as I mentioned, in 4.0, it can take up to 8 seconds to display 10,000 tasks. On the same machine in 5.0, it takes 2 seconds. And we have found that it's roughly 4 times faster with most datasets. It comes with some caveats. The Gantt chart is read-only while the calculations are performed, but it's still scrollable and the schedule is visible, so it makes for a much better UX. It also requires data to be in somewhat good shape, because if there's no, for example, start or end date or duration on a task, we can't really display it. But as long as data is properly normalized, it will show up just fine and a lot quicker. And to further emphasize this improvement, I've made 2 videos. So the first one is a recording of loading 10,000 tasks in version 4. Here we go. You can see it's loading the data, then it's calculating, and in the end, the tasks show up. And that took roughly 8 seconds. And on the next slide, I have a recording of the same process in version 5. Here we go. And they are already visible, a whole lot quicker. And it took about 2 seconds instead of 8. And that's something we are very proud of introducing in version 5. And we're hoping that it will make you and your users happier, less waiting. So, and that's it on performance improvements. If you encounter performance issues, don't hesitate to report them on the forums. We take it very seriously, and I'm personally monitoring any performance regressions that we find. And as we move forward, we are hoping to gain even more speed. So that's it on performance improvements. Now on to the next feature. Next up, we have a new feature in Gantt. It's the parent area highlight feature, whose purpose is to highlight the area encompassed by a parent task and its children. This new feature further bridges the gap between our old lineup and the new, and I'm going to demo it for you. Okay, this is the new parent area highlight demo in Gantt. It starts with highlighting off here so that we clearly can see the effect. And when I check this box, it's turned on. And you can see that the area under this parent task is highlighted, and that the highlight encompasses all the child tasks. And the same is true for all the other parents. Let me toggle that again for you. So without the feature, it looks like this. And with it on, we have this. The 5.0 release has a new resource utilization view written by my colleague Arkady. Kudos to him for making it happen. And the purpose of the view is to show resource usage in an easily graspable way. It shows per resource allocation, and it lets you expand a resource to drill down into the tasks. And it comes with a new demo, and I'm going to open that one. Here we are, and we can clearly see that Celia, for example, is overallocated this Friday and this Monday. And if we expand her node in the tree, we can see why. So she has 2 full-time tasks assigned, installing Apache and configuring ports, and that's a bit much at once. I'm going to drag configured ports into the future to free up some time for her. Okay, and when I dropped it, you notice that the resource utilization view updated automatically, and we can now see that she is no longer overallocated, which is nice. And another thing worth mentioning with this view is that it can be partnered with either Gantt or Scheduler Pro. It can share the project with them containing all the data, and it's also scroll synced, and it's synced on Zoom to match what you're viewing. And that's it for the resource utilization view. Moving on to the next feature. The tree grouping feature is new in Grid and Gantt. It lets you transform one tree dataset into another, or it could also start as a flat dataset and be transformed into a tree. It does so by keeping all the leaves and generating new parents, and which parents are generated is determined by the application. The feature expects an array either of fields or of functions or a mix thereof. When given fields, the distinct values of the fields will be turned into parents, and when given a function, the distinct return values of the functions will be new parents. And for each entry in the array, there will be one additional level in the tree. There's a new demo, one in Grid and one in Gantt, showing the new feature. And I'm going to open the Gantt demo. It starts by being grouped by the priority field. And we can see here it has generated a high priority group and a low priority group. And if I toggle it maybe to cost, you can now see that it's grouped by cost. And just to try another one, we can try the multiple levels using duration and priority. You can see the resulting tree. And this feature is to be considered read-only. The view and especially the parents shouldn't be manipulated since they are transient. They are generated, they are not meant to be persisted. And you can at any point return to the original dataset, and then it's all editable as usual again. And back to the slides. Here we go. That's about it for the tree grouping feature. Moving on to the next one. Grid has a new feature that lets you merge cells within a column when they have the same value and the grid is sorted by that column. Those cells will be merged, similar to having a row span in a table, into a single cell. This can be used in Grid and the products that build upon Grid, for example, Scheduler, Scheduler Pro, and Gantt. And the feature is on display in two new demos, one in Grid and one in Scheduler. I'm going to start with opening the Scheduler demo. Here, the feature is used to merge the name of the teams that each employee here belongs to. It's sort of used to replace grouping here, to give an alternative view. With grouping, we would have a group header stealing vertical space, so this might be a nice alternative on smaller screens, for example. I can toggle the merging on and off. You'll see the teams listed as usual and merged. The demo also has some custom styling for the merged cells, so be sure to check that out. And now let me try and switch to the Grid demo. Now here we go. It has a bit more basic styling, but it lets me show more of the feature. So by default, this demo is sorted by the city column and the cooks column. And it has merging turned on for the city column, but not for the cooks column. Merging can be toggled by the user using the header menu. Let me turn it off here and turn it on there. Merge cells. And it can be on in multiple columns. And if I now resort by the cooks column, for example, it will only merge there. If I toggle the feature on and off, and see what happens. Okay, the feature actually renders the merged cells floating on top of the normal grid. And this is to make it work with the model we have for the grid, where rows are reused as you scroll, but we want the merged cells to survive longer, even when some of the rows are scrolled out of view. The merged cells can intercept clicks, but it can also pass them through to the underlying row. This can be determined per application. And in this demo, they pass the events through by default. But we can toggle the setting here. And now if I click a cell, it selects the cell and all the underlying rows. And that's about it for the merge cells feature. On to the next. For the 5.0 release, my colleague Don added a new radio button. It's a frequently requested widget, and now we finally have it. There's not very much to say about it. It's a radio button. We also have a radio group for showing multiple radio buttons. And the radio buttons can, as the checkboxes, have different colors. They are used in a few different demos. For example, in this taskboard demo, which I'm going to show. So this is the custom task editor demo for taskboard. The editor here has radio buttons to change the department. And if I toggle them, you can see that the card updates in the background. And that's about it for radio buttons. Now on to the next feature. Scheduler Pro and Gantt uses a calculation engine to schedule events and tasks. This engine detects when there are issues in the schedule. For example, there can be constraints on when a task can be scheduled, or there can be links between tasks that form a cycle. There can be calendar violations, etc. All of these can lead to scheduling issues. And when such an issue is encountered, the products previously silently rejected the change leading up to that. Now we instead show a conflict resolution dialog where the user can pick a way of resolving the issue. And I'm going to demo that. So here we have a new demo in Scheduler Pro called the conflicts demo. There's a similar new demo in Gantt, but especially in Gantt, it can be tried in most any demo. And I'm just going to add an invalid dependency here. And we see the dialog presented, and we can pick a way of resolving this issue. We can either remove the dependency, we can deactivate it, or we can just cancel the action. I'm just going to deactivate it. And that's it. We see the deactivated dependency here. And that's it on the conflict resolution dialog. Moving on. Okay, this next one isn't really a feature, but something we hope will be a helpful utility for our clients. I'm going to start with a small confession. Our code, unfortunately, has bugs, but fortunately, we have great users who frequently report bugs on our forums. And this feature is to help you guys out. So when reporting a bug, we often request a test case to be able to reproduce the bug. We need this test case because our code can run on so many different platforms, different browsers with different frameworks. The applications can be doing a whole lot of different things. And all of those combined might be needed to reproduce the bug. Sometimes it's easier, of course, but more often than not, we need a test case. But we do also recognize that it's not always trivial for you to produce a test case. Especially for a large, complex application, it might take a lot of work to narrow it down, to submit only what's needed for the bug. And to simplify this process for you, we have added a test case extractor to all our products. What it does is that it extracts the currently used configs, it inlines the current dataset, and it adds some state and turn all of this into a application, a JavaScript application that is downloaded. The application will require some tweaking to be runnable, but we are hoping that it will be a good starting point for you to create test cases. And I'm going to demo the process. Here we go. So this is a new demo in Scheduler that has buttons to download a test case, but it can actually be run on the console for any code. For example, in grid, you would just type grid.download test case to have it downloaded. This is described more in the docs, of course. But I'm going to download this test case, then I'm going to tweak it a bit to get it running. So here we go. Let's download. Okay, here I have the downloaded test case opened in WebStorm. I have prepared a simple HTML file to be able to view the test case. It doesn't do much. And also I've extracted some CSS to get it to render. And this is the downloaded test case itself. It won't run as is because it has some global variables, etc., that we will have to fix before it's runnable, but let's try it. So here I have it opened in Chrome. It crashed on a global variable. I'm just going to add that one in, leave it empty to get it running. It won't look exactly right, but it will have to do. Okay, let's retry that. Yeah, we got it rendering. It looks almost correct. The colors are wrong, but that doesn't really matter in most cases when it comes to bugs. Also, the images aren't shown, and likely you won't supply us your images, but since this is our code, I can fix them just because it looks nice. I'm going to scroll down here. Oh, there it is. I think the path will be like that. Let's give it a try. Oh yeah. So there we are. We have extracted a test case. We have gotten all the configs currently used, columns, the renderers. We have the data inlined, etc. It's running, and we can submit it to the forums. And with that, we are moving on in the presentation. And now it's time for Mats to tell you about some more new features. Over to you, Mats.
Thanks, Johan. Those demos looked awesome. Great work. So let's see if I can steal the screen again and fire up my video. Okay, there we go. So up next, I would like to show you the new calendar highlighting API that we added to Scheduler Pro. And it's also available in the Gantt chart. So this new feature allows you to visualize calendars that are bound to either events or resources. And there's also an API to allow you to programmatically highlight any custom time span along the time axis. And let's have a look at the demos we built to show you this. So in this demo, the events are tied to a calendar defining the availability. And you can see as I drag around, it nicely shows me where I can drag and drop these. And compare this to the user experience when there's no highlighting, then I'm left with reading the tooltip to figure out where and when I can drop this task. So I think it's a way better understanding of the underlying rules, much deeper cognitive connection with the schedule when you have these visualizations active. And you notice we only show them during drag drop to not clutter the UI too much. And then we built a very similar demo, but instead of the calendar being on the events, in this demo, the calendar are tied to the resource. So you can see as I select an event in the left side, the calendar is highlighted and I can see where I can drag and drop. Same thing here, when I start a drag, I can see which resources are available that can perform this particular task and their availability. And then we have a more custom demo showing a delivery company schedule. So here when you drag a task, there'll be a delivery window highlighted so that you know when a particular task can be delivered. And again, if you flip this off, you have to kind of drag to the sides to figure out what the schedule window is. So it's just a superior experience as a user when you can actually see the window just by clicking on the events, or as you drag, and you can see that you're constrained, so you can't go out of this window. And you have more control on that as well. You can programmatically highlight any time span just by calling an API that's documented. So that's the calendar highlighting API. I hope you like it, and if you have any features or ideas of how to make it even better, please leave a comment. Moving on to the event buffer feature, very, very popular and frequently requested. We also call it travel time. And let me show you the demo we built for this. So the typical use case here is that you have field service technicians that have to go on site to fix a power outage or a flooding or a broken manhole or things of that nature. And they have to travel for a certain amount of time. And they also have to go back after the gig is finished. So this is something you can now define on the event and change it in the event editor. And as most things in the Bryntum APIs, you can just turn it on and off at runtime. And this is actually a generic feature, so it's not tied to the field service technician scenario. You can also use this, for example, in a machine execution scheduling system where a machine needs to cool down after a task, or a layer of paint has to dry before the tasks can continue. So definitely recommend you check this out. And then my colleague Nige made a really nice enhancement to the calendar sidebar date picker. So it now shows you a preview if there is an event or multiple events in that day. You can see here on the sidebar. So if I get rid of this multi-day event, you'll see that these cells were updated. And as I drag drop here, you can see the left side is updated accordingly, which also gives the user just a deeper insight of where the events are scheduled. And again, most things are on off, so you can flip this and decide. Your users can actually decide themselves if they want this feature on and off. All right, and now over to Johan, and let's see how we can combine multiple Bryntum components together in one app.
Thank you, Mats. So I will be showing you how to combine multiple Bryntum components. But first, some background. Currently, when you combine multiple Bryntum products on the same page, if you're using one of our bundles, you will be downloading the same code multiple times. For example, if you combine Gantt with calendar, then both products are built on the same foundation, and that code is in both bundles and thus will be downloaded twice. So for Gantt, for example, we have Gantt, of course, Scheduler Pro, Scheduler, Grid, and Core in the same bundle. And Calendar has Calendar, Scheduler, Grid, and Core. So Core, Grid, and Scheduler will be downloaded twice. This is true both for JavaScript and for CSS. So when combining multiple products, we are wasting bandwidth for the clients. The only viable solution to this in the past has been to build custom bundles from sources, but that's not trivial. So we are hoping to make this easier by introducing thin bundles in 5.0. We have thin bundles for both JavaScript and CSS. And thin means that they only include product-specific code. So there's a thin core bundle that only has the code for core. There's a thin grid bundle that has grid-specific code, and so on. And when you pull one of the thin bundles in, it will import what it needs from the other bundles. So if you combine Gantt and Calendar using thin bundles, you will import Gantt from the Gantt bundle, Calendar from the Calendar bundle, and they will handle importing what they need from the other bundles. And in the end, that means that it will only download Core, Grid, and Scheduler once and not twice, which is a pretty big improvement. And the more products you combine, the more bandwidth you save. And there's another advantage with the thin bundles too. So when you're using the old bundles, you might mistakenly import a class from one bundle and use it with the other bundle. And because of how JavaScript modules work, even if the code is identical, it's not the same module. So there's no guarantee that code will behave the way it's intended. When using thin bundles, there's only one copy of the module, so there's no risk of including the wrong one. And if you were to combine all our products on the same page, perhaps not a very realistic use case, but makes for a good illustration, then all the module bundles combined, the minified versions, would add up to almost 8 megabytes. Quite a big download. But with thin bundles, since all code is only included once, we're just about 2 megabytes. So nice gain there. And if you combine fewer products, still a nice gain, not as big though. Okay, so 5.0 ships with a couple of new demos that combine products. There's one in calendar and one in Gantt. Moving forward, we will be adding more combination demos since it's, well, pretty easy now. And actually, all products ship with all the thin bundles of the other products, but in trial versions. So you can try the combination demos locally, even if you don't have a license for the other product. And you can also build combination demos that way, but the other product will be watermarked and will expire. I'm now going to try and live code a combination demo. So let's jump into that. Here we are. This is the basis for our demo. It's a Gantt chart, and we will be adding a task board underneath it and making it use the same data. And yeah, see if it works using thin bundles. Here we are. So this demo has a Gantt chart in a container, just to have bits of it prepared for the task board. It has a project that holds all the stores and loads the data from a JSON file in this case. It imports from the module bundle. We are going to combine products and use thin bundles. So the first thing I'm going to do is to replace this import with one import of project model from Gantt's thin bundle and one import of the container from course thin bundle. And if you're using thin bundles and are in doubt about in which bundle a class exists, then you can just look the class up in docs and you will clearly see if it's in core, grid, scheduler, or Gantt, and so on. And the path is slightly different. The module thin, and this one, as I mentioned, each product ships with the thin bundles of the other products. So in this case, Gantt has both Gantt's thin module and course thin module. So no problem creating apps using thin bundles. Taskboard, on the other hand, is also included, but it will be a trial since it's not included in the Gantt license. Okay, first I'm just going to see that this still works. I'm going to get DevTools open and reload the page. Yeah, still works. Back to code. And now we're going to add a taskboard. I'm just going to add it here below the Gantt. I'm going to use our widget type system to make it create a taskboard. And I'm going to hook the taskboard up to the same project as we're using in Gantt above. Going to configure it with a resource image path to get nice images of the resources, same as we had in Gantt. A taskboard also needs a set of columns, and it needs a field to the field name to determine which task field is used to put tasks in which column. So let's just come up with some columns. I'm going to make it easier for myself and just use strings. So this, when given a string, the string will be used as the title for the column and as the value to use in data for a task to appear in that column. Let's see. To do work in progress, review, and done. It's also possible to configure different titles on the columns, different colors, etc. But we're not really here to demo taskboard. Just going to carry on here. We're going to use the status field to determine in which column a task belongs. And I didn't mention it earlier, but I have defined the field up here. So a Gantt project, a Gantt task doesn't have a status field by default. Taskboard does, but not Gantt, so I've added it here. I've also added a weight field, which is used to determine the vertical position of tasks in a column. That doesn't exist in Gantt either, so easy enough to add. So I have a taskboard. I've tied it to the project. It knows where to load images from. We have some columns. Let's give it a try. Oops, I forgot to add the import. Back to the code. So we're going to import the taskboard. Actually, we don't need a named import. We can just import it in bundle. We're not using the name of the class anywhere. So we're using just type, and it's enough to import it. It will be registered, and then we can use the type. So let's try that again. Reload the page. Yeah, here we are. So Gantt and taskboard sharing the same project. We can see the same assignments. Celia, who we discussed in an earlier demo, was over-assigned back then. She's assigned here too, to configuring firewalls and installing Apache. Okay, so to show that they are really sharing the data, I'm going to assign another resource to us installing Apache here. And it should reflect in the Gantt chart. So let's say that Rob is also going to assist. So I assign Rob here. And Rob appeared on the card and in the Gantt chart. So now they should be able to manage. 2 devs to install Apache should be enough. And that's it for the combination demo using thin bundles. It was pretty straightforward, I think, to implement it. It saves you some bandwidth when downloading. It protects against importing the wrong module, a module from the wrong bundle. And since we ship all thin bundles with all products, you can experiment freely. So I hope you build something cool and let us know. Over to you, Mats.
Okay, thanks, Johan. So on this topic of combining the Gantt and the taskboard, I had an idea that I would do some live coding and share with you guys another way of combining these two widgets. And these two widgets are a very popular combination we notice from our customers who build project management apps, that they both serve a very clear purpose in these type of applications. So I thought I would build a simple to-do list to show inside of the Kanban cards that you see. You can see a simple demo application skeleton that I put together, and it's up and running. And so what I want to do is to try to render a Gantt chart inside of each card as a small to-do list. So to do that, first I'd need to know a little bit about how the Gantt custom element tag works. So you can use the Gantt chart in its JavaScript form just fine, but you can also describe it as a custom element, which is called Bryntum-Gantt, and then feed it all the configs as dataset properties. Or you can put child tags on the root tag to define columns, projects, features, and data, and so forth. So with that knowledge, I can actually start building something fairly quickly. So in the taskboard, the way to do custom rendering of a card is to add a task renderer method, and that receives a task record and a card config object like this. And then on this card config, I can define a few different things. If we go back to the cards, you can see it has a header element and a footer, and I can also define a body in between. So let's see if we can do that. So in the children, we'll just put a body, and in the children of that body, we'll put, we can use any key here, but I'll just put Gantt for now. And that's going to be an object. And this object is what we in Bryntum call DOM-sync, which is our representation of a DOM element. So on this type of object, I can, for example, put tag Bryntum Gantt. So this should, in theory, already give us a Gantt chart. And you can see that this actually works. We get something added to the screen immediately without too much work. So let's go ahead and see if we can feed some data into the Gantt chart before we go any further. So the data will live under a children of the root tag. So I'm going to put an array, and then I'll put another one called data, which will then have children on its own. And in there, now I'm interested in getting some tasks. So I'll put a tasks object there. And then I've actually already written the data and put them on the task record that belongs to, that represent these outer tasks as something we call to-dos. And we can flip over to the JSON to see here. So these are the tasks that are loaded into the demo, and you can see this is the card data, and it has an array of to-dos. And these are actually DOM-sync configuration, and this is the actual task data that I'm going to be loading in. So this is what's fueling the demo. So with this in mind, I should be able to just go back to the screen and have this running with a bit of luck. Okay, so far it's not very pretty, but it's at least it's up on the screen. So far so good. And I've actually also put dependencies in place under a links placeholder, so we can put that in as well. It won't show yet, but we'll get there. So next up, I don't think we want this name column because we don't have so much real estate. There's a very small area for these cards. I can actually make it a little bit bigger. And so I'm going to try to hide the name column. So I'll do that with a special column tag, and that has a data set. And this is where I identify that I want to target the name column, and I'm going to just set the property of hidden to true. See if that gets me anywhere. Okay, so that's out of the way. Still not seeing the data though. That's a bit concerning. Let me double check this again. So I got tag data, I got tag tasks, and I got children task record to-dos. That looks correct. I must have made some mistake. I should have known better than to start live coding, but bit late now. I seems that I forgot to change this to dependencies. That will break the rendering if we have double tasks. So okay, so that at least got it up and running on the screen. So now it's actually already a fully functional Gantt chart. But I think it's looking a little bit bulky, and I think we don't need 2 rows of headers. That's a bit too much for such a small screen. So let's add some configurations. on the root level again. So let's shrink the rows a bit, down to 25. What does that look like? It's a bit better, and a bit less bar margin. Let's try 10, or maybe a bit less. Yeah, that's a bit better. And I also think that the ticks are a bit too tiny, so we could use the horizontal space a bit more. So let's grow the tick size a bit. Yeah, okay. And then we have a preset defined, which uses just the one header row. So that's going to be single level month. All right. So I think that's a bit nicer to look at already. And so again, this is kind of an overkill for a to-do list, of course, but cool thing that it still works just like a Gantt chart with very little effort. So now I would actually like to see I would like to have a collapse expand button. So how could we do that? So it would be nice to have something in the top right corner of each card, so that if you don't want to see the Gantt chart, you could actually opt out of it. And so the taskboard also has a config for adding header items. So that's going to be an object, and here I can just name the item as I want. So I'm going to call it collapse, and so I'll have a type template. So I'm going to be using a template item which can output any markup, and the template will be defined as just a string which returns some icon markup like this. So, and we have our font awesome library included. So let's see, a chevron up, and these collapse template will also have to be mapped to a field currently. So I'll just map it to status for now. This is an internal quirk that we're going to fix, but for now this is a must-have to get this rendered. So let's see if we get something. All right, so we now have a chevron. Of course it doesn't do anything yet, but at least it's rendered to the task element, so we can do something with it. Okay, so let's add a listener and see what that looks like. So I want to now listen to clicks on this task card, and in the task click event that's part of the taskboard API, we get access to the raw DOM event. And then from the DOM event, of course, I want to know what was clicked. So let's get that on the page. And if we click an icon element, then we want to do something, right? So in the CSS behind the scenes, I've added a collapsed class to shrink the Gantt chart to 0 height. So let's see if we can get that going. If I can just add this to, or toggle this rather. Let's see if that works. So that at least got me the new rendition of the collapsed and expanded state. And then now, of course, I want to do this on the Gantt chart as well. So two things that have to happen for this demo to be satisfactory. So I'll go upwards in the DOM until I find the taskboard card, and I'll query selector for the Gantt chart, Bryntum Gantt, and then we just borrow this again. Class list dot toggle. So in theory this should work. Practice, who knows? But let's gamble and see. All right. So now we actually have a built a collapsible Gantt chart inside the task board with I think this is less than 70 lines of code in total, and of course a little CSS behind the scenes just to toggle the height. And other than that, this is a fully functional Kanban board. So yeah, this is something we just came up with to give you some inspiration and to show you kind of what you can do in terms of combining our products. And yeah, of course, in reality, maybe using a Gantt chart just to build a simple to-do list is maybe a bit over the top, but then again, it's nice to know that it is actually possible, and with very little effort, we were able to get this up and running and working to the point where it actually starts looking quite reasonable. Of course, it's a bit there's the hack here and there, but at least it works. So next up, I would like to show you some of the nice improvements that was made to the drag-drop features of the Bryntum scheduler and the Bryntum Gantt. And these improvements are made as a result of us talking to lots of clients, having lots of discussions in the support forums, as well as lots and lots of pre-sales meetings. And we noted that a few feature requests were very, very similar in these discussions. And that's the ability to be able to drag foreign objects onto the schedule. So I'm happy to share with you today the new and improved demos that we've built to help you implement these type of UIs to match the requirements of your end users. So first of all, there's a new way to do resource assignment in the Gantt version 5. So in this demo on the right hand side, we see a tree grid with resources, so people and machines. And I can just pick up a resource now and drop it anywhere on the task row, and that means a resource assignment. And I can do that as many times as I want. But of course only once per task and resource combination. And not only a single drag, but I can actually pick up multiple resources and assign them all in one go. And for me, this is just way easier than, having to use the picker on the left-hand side to fill out each resource individually. So if you want to do a quick, simple resource assignment, we feel this is a great enhancement of the UX of the Gantt. So moving on to the next demo, and it's similar in the way that we have a list on the right, but in this demo, they are new tasks that are not yet part of the project. So I can just pick them up and drop them anywhere in the WBS. And of course I can assign dependencies to them, and now they're part of the plan. And that only took a few seconds. So super easy to customize. I think this demo is just less than 100 lines of code, so very easy to set up. And moving on to the Scheduler Pro. And we also built a brand new demo here. And if you remember, I showed you earlier the highlight feature, and that's in action here as well. So this is a list of appointments for doctors and nurses. So you can see as I click in these different categories, the availability of the resources matching those skills are highlighted. So I can just pick up a task here and drop it. And just like the previous demo, I can do multi drag and drop as well. So we hope you like this, and if you have ideas of how this could become even more useful, please let us know. We're all ears as usual. And now for a new demo in the Bryntum Scheduler examples collection. So now we showed you how to drag resources and drag tasks. But another use case is the ability to drag equipment onto the events. So I can drag a hammer or a microphone, and you can see that the equipment slides into place nicely with a bit of CSS transition magic. And of course I can drag these tasks around as I want. And the key thing to realize here is that these demos are built to give you inspiration. So they're not a demonstration of what can be done or if as any type of limit. They're just to give you a base of what you can build, and you can take this as far as you want and create your own drag drop flows. So the drag drop feature has really matured with version 5 and is now super stable, and you can really build some cool UIs on top of it. And during the COVID days, I was stuck inside for quite a while, and things got pretty boring. And I thought to myself, how far can we take this drag drop business in the Gantt? So one thing to know here is that the Gantt taskbars are just straight up HTML, and that HTML is customizable. So I can have a taskbar represent anything. So this might look like just a simple rectangle, but as you zoom in a bit, you can see that these are actually Gantt charts within Gantt charts within Gantt charts, and they're individually drag droppable. I can sort here just fine. And this works since there's a really good level of encapsulation here. And the second thing making this work is that we have a web component wrapper available for the Gantt chart. So in the task renderer for this method, we simply return a web component. So that means every taskbar represents another Gantt chart. And this is of course super silly. This was just a fun demo. We don't recommend that you put this in production anywhere. But if anyone would feel that this is cool, or you want to get the source code, please don't hesitate to reach out. And we might put this in the standard sample selection. But the fun thing here is that it actually just works. And this demo was not hard to build, a few hours. And now let's get a bit more serious. So we've seen now in the forums in the past month that a lot of you are trying to upgrade, and that's great. And we want to show you what we think is a good process to go about doing this. So before you even start upgrading, we recommend that you start by reading the upgrade guide of the product that you have licensed. So let's say you have licensed the Scheduler Pro. That means you need to study its upgrade guide. And since the Scheduler Pro is a subclass of the scheduler and then the grid, you need to study those guides as well. So you can find these guides in our online docs or in the docs that you downloaded under the upgrading folder. You can see here 5 going back all the way 4.3, 4.2, 4.1.5, and here you can just go through each section, look carefully for APIs or methods, classes that you use in your app. Because if you face any upgrade issues, they're likely to be mentioned in here. And you have to keep in mind that the only chance we have at Bryntum to break APIs, that's when there's a major release. So when you see things being deprecated in a minor release or a patch release, they're what we call soft breaks. So things continue working as before, but there's a console warning giving you a heads up that it's probably a smart choice to make the suggested change. And then if you do that a bit more regularly, you won't have a very hard time when it's time for the upgrade to the next major. So that's something we definitely recommend. And then for those of you who really want all the details of what's changed under the hood, we have built a diff grid, which shows the API diff between two versions. So let's say you want to go to the latest and you're currently on 4.3.3, click compare, and then we can filter out the changed to only focus on the removed. So this now gets you a list of all the classes and their methods or APIs or configs, events that have been removed. So again, if you really want to go through all the details, this is a great place to start. And then when you're done with the removed, you can look at the changed and so forth and do it in a structured manner. And this would probably give you the best outcome when you then start making the change to the source files. And now I will hand over to Johan, and he's going to show you a hands-on upgrade process from 4 to 5. Over to you, Johan.
Thank you, Mats. As Mats mentioned, I'll be attempting a live upgrade of a simple app from version 4 to version 5. We are going to see that it has some issues after upgrading. I'm going to talk about how I find those issues and what to do about them. Let's just dive straight into the demo. So here I have the demo opened. Let's open DevTools. In DevTools, it already has a warning that I'm using a deprecated API. So this app is using version 4 of our bundles, and it says that it will be removed in version 5. So the expected outcome here is that we'll get a crash on this because it will be removed when I change to version 5. Over to the code for the demo. So this is the code. It's basically a clone of the basic demo in Scheduler. It has some inline data, which I've tucked away to save some space. It has adaptations of the header context menu feature, which was deprecated according to that console warning. It has a custom event renderer. That's about it. So if I now try to upgrade this, I'm going to change to a newer bundle and do the same for the CSS. And then I'm going to switch back over to Chrome and reload. I'm now getting a crash. The feature no longer exists. Okay, need to fix that. And in the original deprecation message, it said what I was supposed to do. It was replaced with the time access header menu. So I'll change to that, reloading the page. Okay, we got past that. Now it crashed on something else. So now it crashed on cannot set properties undefined in the event renderer. So I'm using something there that was removed in version 5. And unfortunately, not everything can be accompanied by a console login message. If, for example, params to functions are harder for us to programmatically deprecate. So in these cases, well, it should be listed in the changelog and hopefully also in the upgrade guide what should do about it. So in this case, let's go over to the code. It's the TPL data argument. You see I'm trying to set event color for it. That doesn't exist any longer. I've prepared with opening the changelogs, and let's track it down there. Here we can see it was replaced by render data, and that happened way back in version 4. And this is documented in the upgrade guide of Gantt. A bit misfortunate, but we found it anyway in the changelog, so it's always good to check both sources. We are, of course, striving to have this documented as good as we possibly can. But now we know we need to replace TPL data with render data. Over to the code. I'm just going to replace it there, and there, and then reload the demo, and we'll see. And now it works in version 5. There are no console warnings, so we're no longer using any deprecated API. And hopefully all is good. And we managed to upgrade, so that's it. We are moving on to the next topic, and I'm giving controls back to Mats.
Okay, thanks, Johan, and great work on the upgrade demo app you built. So we've shown you quite a few features and new additions during this webinar, but there's actually more on the way. And now I'd like to take a few moments to show you what's to come in our short-term and long-term roadmaps. We are actually already working on this feature called split task of the Gantt chart, something we had in the past, and we're only a few weeks away from having this ready. So super happy about that, and yeah, you'll see it probably in the 5.1 release that's coming in not too long. We are also working on real-time updates, one of my personal favorites. So this will be a bit like Google Docs. So you can be multiple people working on the same schedule, and you'll see changes flow immediately without having to use save buttons or do full saves. So it will be incremental updates pushed as they happen in the different users' applications. So it will be very, very cool. I've already seen a small sneak peek of the result, and it's looking really promising. We also started RTL a while back, so we made some good progress on that. Much thanks to Johan, and it's looking very promising as well. It's already part of the or supported by the grid, and we hope to have the Gantt be ready next, and then full support across all the products ready by the summer. We're also going to improve the filtering and to have support for customizable operators like today, yesterday, tomorrow, between, and so forth. This is looking like a Q3 task. And another of those mega features is the accessibility. And this actually started during the fall last year, but it's a really, really big feature since it affects our entire widget set, and basically anything that has anything to do with the UI will be affected by this feature. But there's actually already parts of this merged to the 5.0 branch, so it's available, and you can see if you inspect the DOM that there's area attributes already in place, and the key navigation has already been greatly improved. So great work by Nige there. Kudos to you. And in Q3 we will ship extended language packs. So today we don't ship so many languages. There's English, Swedish, a few more, but this is about to change, and we will have French, Chinese, Japanese, Korean, and so forth. So that will be very exciting. And also a lot of you have requested spreadsheet selection, just like in Excel. And this is also something we had in the old XJS Gantt chart. And of course, this is coming for the new one as well. So we hope to have this ready by the end of the year. Hopefully sooner. And finally, we also have a separate product coming, which will help with optimizations of the schedules. So basically working with the data to make sure you get the optimally produced schedule given a number of different constraints, like skill sets or budget or timing constraints and so forth. So more about that in a future webinar. So this should give you a good overview of things to come. But rather than just talk about what's coming, we thought we would actually give you a few demos of what's coming, when I think a demo is always more fun than a bunch of slides. So I'd like to hand it over to Johan. Why don't you take the screen?
Time for some sneak peeks of what's to come. So Mats has presented the roadmap, and I've been given the opportunity to show you some of the things that's coming. Some features that I will show will come soon, maybe in the next minor release or the next one after that. Others will be coming in later, probably in the next major release. But anyway, we dive into dependencies. And before I tell you what's changed and what's new here, I just wanted to give some background. So we have had support for dependencies since the first release of the new product lineup. We support dependencies in Scheduler, Scheduler Pro, and Gantt. And they all share the same drawing code, more or less, and the same dependency creation code, the same dependency editor, etc. But the purpose of the dependencies differ between the products. So in Scheduler, it's just a visual decoration. There's no built-in meaning to the dependencies. If an app needs some logic connected to dependencies, that's entirely up to the application. While in Scheduler Pro and Gantt, dependencies affect the schedule. So for example, a task that is a successor of another task can't start before that previous task ends. So to sum it up, in Scheduler, dependencies are just a graphical feature. In Scheduler Pro and Gantt, they also have a meaning connected to the schedule. Okay, and new, possibly coming in the next minor release, is that we now support dependencies also in vertical mode in Scheduler. And there's a new demo to show it off. I'm going to open it now. This is the new demo showing dependencies in vertical mode. It's all very similar to dependencies in horizontal mode, just in vertical mode. You can create events the same way by hovering an event. It then shows the terminals for creating events. If you drag from one of those to another event, you can create a new dependency. If you drop on the event itself, it will also create a dependency. But by hovering the terminal, you can create a dependency to a specific side of the other event. And it reacts on drag, drop, and resize, same way as in horizontal mode. And that's about it for dependencies in vertical mode. While refactoring the dependency feature to work in vertical mode, I had the chance to also clean it up and improve it. So in the coming release, I guess in the next minor, the dependency feature will have a live drawing mode. And what I mean by live, I'm going to try and illustrate using two videos here. So the left video was recorded on the current released version, and the right video I recorded on the new yet unreleased version. And we can immediately here see that something is fishy in the current version. And when I play the video, you're going to see what it is. So here we go. Okay, you see that this demo used an initial animation to slide events in from the left, but the dependencies didn't slide in. They were already at the correct location when the animation started. And this is because dependencies are not drawn or redrawn during animations or transitions. So they just appear at the correct location. This is also visible when you, for example, reschedule a large block of tasks in Gantt. The dependencies snap into place first, and then the tasks transition there. In the new version, we instead draw events during animations. So on each animation frame, when there is an ongoing transition or animation involving events, the dependencies are redrawn. And it then looks like this instead, which in my opinion makes for a much nicer UX and a smoother experience. And you might think that this adds complexity to the dependency feature, but in fact it does not. So the refactored feature actually has 40% less code than the currently released version. So we have removed about 1,000 lines of code from it, which is always nice. The best feeling is getting rid of code, I think. Yeah, and I'm also going to attempt a live demo of this. So moving on to the next slide, where I'm going to show the updated dependencies demo. Let's open it. So I'm actually going to show the old dependencies demo first to highlight some issues that the live drawing also fixes. First, I'm going to change the demo to allow multi-event selection. Multi-event select. True. And then I'm going to select a few events and I'm going to drag them, and you see the issue right away. It's only dependencies to the first event that are redrawn during drag. And this is because there's a special code path handling this in the event drag feature. With the new dependency mode, let me switch over to that branch. Okay, and then reload the demo. Multi-select is on by default, and so is the event drag select. Now I have the same event selected. I've also tweaked the selected styling. There was none in the previous demo. And now if I move them, all dependencies are nicely redrawn during the drag. So this is a positive side effect of the live drawing mode. And it also improves the user experience. Yeah, and that's it for the improved dependencies feature. Next up, I'll be showing some filter bar improvements. Filtering is one of our most popular features. Well, actually, we have two filtering features. We have the filtering feature and the filter bar feature. They both apply filters to the underlying store. To in grid, filter away rows, in Gantt, to filter away tasks, and so on. The filtering feature is traditionally a bit more advanced. It shows a pop-up where you can, for example, filter dates before, after, or equal to a date, and so on, while the filter bar feature displays text fields under or in the grid headers, as you can see on this image. It's a bit simpler in that you could only specify, for example, a date, and it would be an exact match. You couldn't pick if it was before or after that date, and so on. But in an upcoming minor release, we will be releasing an improved filter bar UI where you can actually pick the operator. And I'm going to demo that for you. Let me put that to full screen. Okay, so this is the already existing filter bar demo, but it has been improved with the new operator picker extension. So for example here, if I'm going to filter on a date, I can pick, it should be exactly that date, before that date, or after that date. Or I can pick one of the quick presets, like tomorrow, today, yesterday. And I think this set of quick presets is going to expand before we released it, but we'll see. For another type of column, for example, a number column, we have a similar set of operators to pick from. Maybe we want to see everyone that's less than or equal to 29 years old. There we go. Let me clear that filter for you. For strings, we can pick equals to, not equal to, or the string should start with or end with, and so on. So for example, let's pick all names that start with T, or all names that ends with an E. Okay, so it's easy to use, but still quite powerful. I also want to mention a mode for the filter bar that we added, I guess, some minor releases ago, but it also has a compact mode. When it's enabled, you can't really see the filter bar, but it's still there. So I can just click the header to activate it and then type, which is nice, I think. It's not as obvious how to use as when you're not using the compact mode, but for some applications, it gives a sleek look. And that's it on filter bar improvements. And we're now going to move on to a bit heavier subjects that are planned for maybe the next major release. So stay tuned. RTL support is a much requested feature that is not easy to implement, but it is in progress, so that's good news. Some background on what needs to be done to make it work is that, well, it needs to flip the UI, but it also needs to flip the logic, so to say, to resolve dates in the correct direction in scheduler. Dragging needs to happen in the right direction, and so on. So there's a lot of moving parts, etc., that needs tweaking and that needs to take this into account. So fortunately, our new lineup is based on modern CSS layouts, and that gives us some RTL support for free. For example, flexbox layouts and grid layouts, they flip automatically with the reading direction. No manual work needed there. Padding, margin, and alignments, they don't flip out of the box, but there are newish direction neutral settings that you can use. So, for example, instead of using padding left and padding right, you can use padding inline start and padding inline end, and those will flip with the reading direction. So padding inline start on an LTR system means padding left, while it on an RTL system means padding right. And the same is true for margin. You have margin inline start, margin inline end. For alignment, you can use start and end too, and they will flip with the direction. So that simplifies things. Unfortunately, not everything is that simple, but these parts we have mostly covered in some of our products. I will go into more details on that soon. Some of the more difficult things to fix are positioning. So for example, events in scheduler are absolutely positioned. A lot of other stuff that's not as obvious is too, like the ticks on our time axis and other stuff. There are newish, or a bit too new actually, direction neutral CSS properties that you can use. They are called inset inline, for example, would translate to left or right, but unfortunately we can't use them yet. We want to support browsers that are more than like a year old. I hope we can use them soon though, but until we can, we have to have, well, two different sets of code or styling depending on the reading direction. So for example, use left or right to position a task. And another obstacle we have to work around is when using translation. So when you have a transform with a translate setting to displace some element, then that is always from the left-hand side. It's not flipped with the reading direction, so you have to compensate for that in code. This is, for example, used in some parts of our dragging code. That makes it tricky. We have to flip it in code and of course cover it with tests, etc. And scrolling is another, well, it's strange in my opinion, but it is what it is. So scrolling in RTL happens in negative space. So the scroll coordinates aren't positive but negative. Also the code needs to be adapted to take that into account. But anyhow, we are working on this, and actually core, grid and taskboard are already mostly RTL compliant. We haven't announced this yet because we want to adapt all products before we do, but I'm going to demo it. I'm going to open an RTL demo in taskboard to start with. Full screen again. So here you can see the columns rendered in flipped order. Normally the demo would have backlog on the left, now it's on the right. Tasks, the cards for the task are also flipped, and so are the controls. If I open the editor, all fields, etc. are flipped in the other direction. Margins and paddings are all corrected, and things are actually working. Dragging works, and so on. So for taskboard, we are maybe not 100% complete, but we are pretty complete. And this is also true for grid. If I close full screen, there we are, and open a grid demo instead. Let's pick a simple one, basic. I'm going to enter full screen again, open DevTools, and then force flip the direction here. So we do detect the reading direction from the document, from the page. Yeah. It can either be specified, for example, on the body element as the dir attribute, or it can be in CSS, or you can force the component. So let's force the grid here to use RTL. And this is a neat shortcut you can use in all our demos. You can access the instance on the console using grid in grid, scheduler in scheduler, Gantt in Gantt, and so on. So here I forced it to use RTL, and you see that everything flipped. The order of the columns changed, the text is aligned on the other side, and so on. And yeah, most of it works as you would expect. There's still some minor issues to iron out, but all in all, we are moving forward. Currently, we are working on RTL support in scheduler, and that's the trickiest product because there's a lot of dragging and resizing going on, as I described on the first slide. We need to work around that, but hopefully this will land in version 6. We're aiming for that, at least. And that's it on RTL support. Next topic will be accessibility. I'm a bit out of my depth here on accessibility. Our accessibility expert, Nige, has been working hard on making our components more accessible. We want them, of course, to be usable by as many people as possible. And the current effort to make it more accessible involves marking everything up with ARIA attributes. I'll show you more about that. And also we are improving keyboard navigation to make it more accessible using keyboard input. And this effort is a very big one. We have started with the core widgets, like the basic widgets like combo boxes, text fields, buttons, checkboxes, and so on. After that, we moved on to focus on grid. And currently, we have an ongoing effort in scheduler. And as I mentioned, this effort involves marking everything up with area attributes. When we do, the browser can construct an accessibility tree. So it's similar to the DOM tree, but it's not the same thing. And the accessibility tree is used by, for example, screen readers to annotate for sight-impaired users what's on screen. So it's important to get it as correct and concise as possible to allow them to navigate around and understand what's on the screen, even when they can't see it. And Chrome has recently added a full accessibility tree to their browser. So I will be showing a grid demo and opening that for you to see. Yes, let's open the demo. Okay, so I opened the grouping demo in grid. We could have opened any demo, but it looks pretty nice, so I picked that one. Let me open the DevTools. So on the Elements tab in DevTools, we see the DOM tree. In the DOM tree, you can see that we have some area attributes. For example, here we have, let me enlarge that. One more step, maybe a bit big. The outer grid element has role presentation on it. That basically means that screen readers, etc., will not take notice of it. It will be ignored. If we dig in, we have the body, still role presentation, toolbar, we have the panel body itself, a header. The header has a role of row, and this is according to the area spec for data grids. So the header counts as a row, and on keyboard navigation, if you navigate up from the top row, you navigate into the header. So it's, as far as screen readers are concerned, it's a row, just different contents than the other rows. So it's marked up with that. It's marked up with the area attributes to tell it it's the first row. And inside it, the header cells are flagged to be cells. Here, if I dig down, there it is. Well, actually, it was flagged as a column header. My bad. Anyway, so we are using area attributes as much as possible. It yields a slightly larger DOM footprint, but it's absolutely worth that overhead. And based on these area tags, the browser can generate an accessibility tree. It's this button. And here we have the grid, the header row, body with all the grid rows. And you can see that it has ignored irrelevant DOM elements, the ones flagged as presentation, to not spam the screen readers, etc. If I open a row, actually this is the selected row, we can see that it knows that. It has cells. We can see that the cells are focusable, they're not read-only, meaning that cells can be entered and the screen reader can convey this information to the users. And if you edit the cell, there's an adaptation here. So we have moved the cell editor into the cell. Previously it was floating above it, but by moving it into the cell, we simplify accessibility. It makes more sense to the screen reader, etc. And the focus handling is easier to follow, and so on. So someone might have noticed this, but now you know the reason. And well, this all, as I mentioned, is an ongoing effort. What you see here is already released. So we're not waiting for it to be finished. We are improving as we go, meaning that many of our widgets are already accessible, but there's still much work left, and hopefully we'll land it. I can't promise, but I'm hoping that we will land it in the next major release. And I think that's it on accessibility. Now over to Mats.
And as we usually say in our blog posts and communications in our support, is that we love it to hear your feedback, and the features that we produce are almost exclusively a result of you guys telling us what you want. So now is the optimal time to drop us a line, give us a note in the chat, or send us an email. We love to hear what you think we should do next. That's the most vital part of our business, really. And with that, I think we've reached the end of the webinar, and we have some time for questions. So yeah, looking forward to hearing what you have to say, and thanks so much for listening.